If you have a friend that wants to watch a Power Ranger episode that isn't too violent or that is more for kids, or that is more playful, potentially, I just got done watching For Whom the Bell Trolls, the ninth episode of the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger series. And in a lot of ways, it's a really good and classic episode, but in a lot of ways, it's also a little bit infantilizing. Like it really shows the age demographic they were really striving to write for. There are a lot of really good things about this. I'm really torn because this started out really, really high on my ranking list. And now we're almost to 10 episodes, but there are ways in which kind of the infantilization aspect of it started to wear after a while. But there are a lot of really good things in this episode, criticisms I've had that I'm finally able to say that working through. I think this is the first episode where it really felt like the actors are really more embodying their characters. There's a really great moment with Kimberly and Jason and Zack in the juice bar, in the kind of second act of the episode where Jason is going to break a whole bunch of boards, and Kimberly's helping, and Zack is there sparring with him where I really felt that they were actually really getting into their groove. And I love a good Billy Trini combination episode, so this worked really well too. Um, the episode starts off, and I don't know how this exactly happened, but when I picture Angel Grove High, I picture a building that is so much bigger and so much closer to like Buffy Sunnydale High School than whatever they were using for the footage of this high school. This is the first episode with Miss Appleby, not Mrs., but Miss Appleby, in her kind of Quacker Factory best. This is the first episode where we get an establishing of kind of who they're in a grade with. So they do have a grade with Bulk and Skull, who are called by their first name in this episode. Bulk and Skull do sit in the back, so that must mean they originally sat back there together, or they've been doing that for a while. Because Miss Appleby seems the type to be very accommodating to that sort of thing. Um, there's something interesting here in the episode where I felt like I learned a lot about Trini and Zack, and I didn't learn anything about any of the other Rangers. They were still just who I knew them as. It's really cool for me to learn that Zack knows quite a bit about surfing. I don't think that's ever going to come up again in the series, but it is reminiscent of other Rangers that have kind of surfing motifs that we're going to see later. So I really liked that. Um, Billy's volcano project, which he shows off as his hobby, is like weirdly third grade, and I saw this a little bit in the episode. I got a little troubled by it, and I'm not sure if it's because they're doing it for Miss Appleby, but they don't want to get too complicated. But in seeing Trini's bedroom, which this is the first bedroom we'll see of the kids of the teens with attitude. Sorry, see where I got tripped up at. Um, Trini's bedroom looked like it was decorated for a 7-year-old, and it's just a whole bunch of dolls everywhere. It doesn't seem like a bedroom a teen would have at all, let alone one with an attitude, let alone one with some martial arts knowledge. Um, what's interesting is everyone in class except for Bulk and Skull are really into Trini's discussion about dolls. They love Kim doing a handstand. They really love the surfing thing, which I actually liked. Jason just does some kata moves. They were really impressed by Billy's volcano, which is it's this weird dichotomy of the last episode, I Guy. It's like the really, really young kids were super smart and having a science fair. And this episode following it, if you watch them back to back, it's sort of like the continuity of Who's the Boss, where they talk about how Judith Light's character is like never going out on dates and is hyper work focused and just like needs a makeover. But in like Who's the Boss, every third episode is Judith Light's character going out on a date. Um, yeah, so for Whom the Bell Trolls, really, it feels like I don't know if it's there's a little bit of like you can tell where the footage is from. There's one, if you can watch this, by the way, you have to watch the original 90s cut, not the reimagining, because I think the reimagining revision probably got rid of this, but there is an episode shot with the Megazord with like a kid there for like 10 seconds in the shot, showcasing the model size difference. And I think that's probably because in the Sentai episode, the villain Tickle Sneezer does differently, which by the way, bad name for a villain. Eventually I just had to knock some points off for that in the ranking. Um, yeah, so it's really interesting because I love this episode because it showcased a little bit more about Rangers I've been wanting to know more about. I don't know, something about this infantilization kind of feels antithetical to how I feel about the Rangers. It feels like I want to get to know about more about Trini, especially as a person, because this is the second or third episode now really focused on her. And we don't really get that, it feels like. Like having her room look like it was decorated for a 7-year-old is really hard. Having her have to be rescued in this episode, but also be the star of it is kind of interesting. Tickle Sneezer as a villain is also really compelling because I can't tell what mythology it's based on. So I was looking up different elves because in the Power Ranger Wikipedia, um, Mr. Tickle Sneezer's talked about as an elf, but he's much closer to like a troll from Scandinavia or a goblin or even like a yokai. And I do wonder if this is done differently in the Sentai episode. I don't think I've actually seen this particular Sentai episode. I have to go back and watch, but there's this thing where this is a doll that Trini's mom had amongst Trini's collection of dolls. And this is apparently like, it's not like a protective spirit, but there's a part of me as the tabletop game creator that wants to be like, oh, protective home spirit. Trini's mom knew something. And I have to resist that a little bit. Um, yeah, it's this interesting like thing where Trini is really into dolls. Nothing before I've seen like I would expect it more potentially out of Kimberly than I would out of Trini. Not bad at all, by the way. Um, yeah, no, it's really interesting thing of this episode seems to want them to be kids but also be teens with attitude. Kimberly has some really great moves spotlighted in the battle between because Tickle Sneezer is Goldar is sent there after Tickle Sneezer is brought to life by this really interesting contraption that Squat has that I don't think we ever see again that brings him to life, and then Rita sort of brainwashes him, and Zordon later says, hey, he still has goodness in his heart. So maybe this was sort of like a backdoor preview of when you meet Tommy, you know he can be redeemed because we did this with the villain previously, sort of thing. I don't know. Um, Sorry, there's just so much that happened this episode. At the end of the episode, the button of it is that even though they're in English class, it's a hobby week, and Bulk and Skull hobby is parasites. They have a flea circus. There's something really interesting in which Bulk and Skull's reaction to these very childlike hobby week presentations feels most correct for a teen, but then they have a flea circus. It's a little inconsistent with what we got from I Guy, but the episode is still really good in that you see the Rangers working together. Um, Trini is very earnest and like missing this doll, which makes me wonder, and I don't think this is true, but it's like, did Trini's mom pass away and her spirit's in this doll, sort of thing? The doll itself, I can't pinpoint its origins, but it has like a legendary book about it. It's the only doll of hers that has a like book of legends to it. So this is a form of magic that Rita's not surprised by, but also can't necessarily do. We learn a little bit about Rita here in that she had to study magic and become evil, so she didn't start out that way. It's a very small thing, but it influences much later in the series, like up to Power Rangers in space, when she becomes, I think it's the All Mother or something. So there's a lot of like lore drop, and you learn a lot in this episode. Quintessential Power Ranger battle, even though there's kind of three villains the Rangers are facing, it feels chaotic, but chaotic in a way where it's like meant to feel chaotic. Um, it is not a bad episode, especially if you want to be like, here, watch this episode to like see if your kids are going to like the show. I think For Whom the Bell Trolls is probably the best version of that. Um, it started off really high in the ranking. I actually thought for a while it was going to bump High Five down a level, even though I really love High Five. I think the skeleton. the skeleton creature with the cape and the bag is still a really strong villain. Uh, yeah, for whom the bell trolls is interesting because there's something whimsical about it, but it was almost like they were trying to do an episode after I Guy that was sort of the flipped version of it. Because it's hard to imagine this is the same Angel Grove where like the 10-year-olds are having a science fair where someone literally creates a disintegrator. And then in this episode, the big thing is Billy has a volcano mock-up, which I thought at first he had a board game because he had a box with him in his seat. One of the other kids, as they're getting up at the end of the episode, it looks like they have a nutcracker. It's hard to tell. There are kites that are on display in this classroom. And this is in English. There's a line that Miss Appleby says too about why do we have quotation marks or something like that to end out kind of that portion of the episode. And it's this kind of amusing thing of like, was this written in 93 for my age demographic as to what the executives thought I would think high school was like? Because remember, in the Sentai, Zurianger, who this is based on, because it's still Zurianger, um, they weren't high schoolers. Like in the Sentai tradition, high schoolers didn't become Sentai until what we think of as Zio. Like that was very purposeful. Um, I don't know. So like in a way, this is a really good quintessential Power Ranger episode. Everyone gets a spotlight. Trini gets a really cool spotlight with Billy. They get captured and they don't have enough time, nor do they try to escape, which I'm like, um, what's interesting is that like Jason is the only person I don't feel like learned much about. Kim is a little better than the episode where she pops gum, distracts him, and press engagement. Um, I like the idea that I learned about uh, Zack surfing. And the next episode, I believe, is Happy Birthday, Zack. So we'll learn more about Zack, which I'm super excited to do. Uh, Yeah, so For Whom the Bell Trolls ended up lower on the list than I thought it was going to, but it's interesting. It's interesting because it feels like Mr. Tickle Sneezer is really important mythologically, but also isn't of any mythology that is earthbound because he doesn't really fit either in a D&D sense, but he's also not a Scandinavian troll, but he's also not malevolent enough to be any of the versions of Matami, maybe Matami. Maybe yokai, maybe what is it? Denbro. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. But I was looking at different types of elves because the Wikipedia for Power Rangers specifically says Tickle Sneezer is an elf. So I was trying to figure out what mythology he would have. And I sort of had to stop because none of the mythologies for yokai or yukai feels closest. Um, I think Matami as well kind of feel, or Mitama, I guess, feels pretty close to because that's like household objects. The most interesting thing about this episode is this idea that villains can be redeemed. Um, because he was grateful to Rita for bringing him to life, but he ultimately hears Trini's voice in the Megazord and responds to that too. So it's almost like Tickle Sneezer, which again, horrible name, is sort of like a household god or a protector. Like in my tabletop game, a character like this would easily be a reoccurring side bit that then would have a reveal. So I feel like there's something really interesting. This idea to, because the bottles Tickle Sneezer has, he has one bottle, and this bottle allows him to like trap things into a dimension that he has. But this is something he does organically, not something Rita gives him. They do a really smart thing here, by the way, by only having him have one bottle and then he has to put it in a bag. And then I guess he has to wait for a new bottle or for the thing in the bottle to transfer dimensions. So technically, he only has one bottle as a time, but he has more. And his whole thing as a character is he collects goodies, which could be anything. The first goodie he collects is like this really cool yellow motorbike, which is very much like, oh, that's definitely Sentai footage. Um, Yeah, so I'm been thinking about that for a while. I also wish they hadn't named him Tickle Sneezer. Like, I can't take that kind of villain seriously. Like, Pudgy Pig, at least, a little on the nose, but makes sense. So not a bad episode. It ended up in It ended up now fourth place. So a few things have been knocked out of the ranking. After I've done episode 10, I'm going to do another top five ranking video for where we are, just to try to get myself further in the YouTube algorithm. But yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. I wasn't sure I was going to like For Whom the Bell Trolls because I felt like the pun in the title was kind of like groan-inducing. And honestly, Mr. Tickle Sneezer does not have a pleasant looking like build. Like the face is a little bit like the 90s troll dolls, but a little bit probably closer to what the Scandinavian troll doll looked like in the 50s, 60s, because that's when it got really popular in America before it had the revamp in the 90s, which I had a couple of those, by the way. Um, yeah, so it's an interesting concept. I think there's an interesting episode in there somewhere where I'm not going to begrudge them Hobby Week. I don't think you do it in English class. I think you do it in like a different class, but it's nice to see Miss Appleby. It's nice to hear Farkas and Eugene called that again because you only really ever hear them as Bulk and Skull, except for like a few minor episodes like this. I really liked the interplay. It really feels like this is a moment where the Rangers have sort of hit their stride, that the actors playing the Rangers. I really liked in the battle, like Kim is sort of at the head of it, and Kim is really starting to keep an eyeball on others. I think it's a big part of the Pink Ranger canon to have this empathy, and we're going to see this later, like during the Eclipse episodes, during the handover episodes with the coins where the parents are in danger. Um, when the uh when the first version of the Zords get exploded, that's a big moment is Kimberly trying to run to save her Zord because she has so much empathy. So it feels like this is the first episode where like we're past the this is what the concept is and now we're building into the universe. It's not the way I would have done it. It's not bad, but there's a lot of good, clever stuff in here that doesn't feel like it comes to fruition in a manner that you could do now. If you were to reimagine this episode, especially, I think you could do a lot with just what you have, and move on from there. So I'm a little torn. And one way it was a good episode, in another way, I don't expect it to stay in the top five for very long. I thought it was going to rank higher because through about half the episode it did. But like I said, kind of, there's something a little uncomfortable with the infantilization, especially of Trini in a way. Like I was so excited that we got to see Trini's bedroom because we were going to learn something about her, the found footage or the B-roll of the exterior of Trini's house. She has a turret style bedroom. So she's got a Sabrina the Teenage Witch bedroom, essentially. But I feel like it didn't learn anything. I feel like I learned more about Zack. I also don't like it when like Ranger kidnap episodes are hard because it feels like there should be time for it to breathe so they can try it out. But um, Trini and Billy never get the chance to attempt that. I do think it's a really cool thing of that Jason knew when to bring the Megazord down. It's a good nod to Scandinavian trolls too, because there are some versions of Scandinavian trolls where they're killed by lightning. So there's also sort of a lightning motif with the Megazord, anyways. Um, yeah, it's an interesting episode. I think there's a lot of good in it. I think if somebody is like, what episode of Power Rangers should I watch to get a feel for this show for my kid? Um, for whom the Bell Trolls would not be the worst example. Uh, I do think it's interesting. It took us until episode 9 for me to feel like we're really rolling into the show. But a lot of this hadn't happened before in American culture, show. It's understandable. Um, yeah, but that's all I got for you today. For Whom the Bell Trolls, episode 9 of season 1 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Only a million episodes to go, 65 of which are part of this first season. I'm excited to share those with you, and as Zordon likes to say, may the power protect you.